And the video. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger for you guys. All right. So now we're going to talk about skills development. In terms of DI, when we are focused on skills development, it's going beyond like our typical classroom skills, right? Like we're not trying to teach them math equations or anything that's like a specific Common Core, we have to cover this and whatever. But that does happen. I mean, that's part of our skills development. Things do show up. But a lot of the time, it's skills about conflict resolution or how to deal with time management or ways of organizing ideas and making decisions in a way that's collaborative and not just about who's the loudest talker in the group or who's the most forceful or who's the general leader. We try to teach them a lot of different skills. And when I teach skills that are things that they might use in their presentation, I try to do it in a very general way. So we'll do, in my school, we'll do these DI days where all the kids come to school and we're there for like a half a day on Saturday and they can sign up for workshops to learn how to sew, to learn how to use a drill, to learn acting techniques, to learn how to build a scenery support, to learn creative uses of cardboard. So we'll do skills development in that way so that it's not interference because we're not teaching towards their presentation, but we're giving them some skills that they might be able to use. But these skills are also things like conflict resolution and project management that are specific things and tools that are in your packets that you will get with the team number that you can use. So these are all the types of areas that we end up working with. So again, just to reiterate, we have our 3 basic pieces of the DI Teen Challenge experience, and we are going to spend the next half hour just talking about skills building. When we're talking about skills development, we want to think about 21st century skills, which is like this buzzword that we all want to talk about. And we're all like, oh, we're focused on 21st century learning. Okay, this is like this fancy way for saying all the things that we learn how to do in life. Oh, but now we're going to do it in the classroom. There's no reason that this stuff ever should have been separated from the classroom. But the idea that we're doing this new innovative thing, I think, comes from in a traditional setting. There's the teacher is the focus, the teacher is the one who has the information and the students receive the information. That's not the way that kids really learn. I mean, they can memorize, but do they really learn it when they do it that way? We want to teach them about creative problem solving, creativity in problem solving, and that the problem isn't going to be necessarily solved because I went and asked the adult for a resolution. That's not usually how things work in life. I mean, sometimes it is, but for the most part, we got to solve our own problems. We're not going to go to somebody and say, hey, solve this problem for me, or how should I solve this problem? But when we do that, sometimes it's because we're asking for collaboration from somebody. It's important that they put this skill into their arsenal because it makes it something that they'll be able to apply in their life. This is something that we do every day as adults. There's no reason that kids can't apply the same type of thing. We want to teach them critical thinking. Critical thinking is not saying your idea is dumb, we're not going to use it. Okay, critical thinking is really analyzing what's possible. What are all the possibilities of putting things together? What do we think is the most important? What order do we think we need to do things in? They need to work on communication because if they're not talking to each other and sharing and communicating their ideas, they're going to have a really hard time moving forward. And they need to work with collaboration. Collaboration is something that we all do all the time. We have to learn how to work with different kinds of people in life. I mean, you're never going to be living your life and operating in a vacuum. You're always going to have to figure out how to deal with somebody who's different from you, somebody who thinks in a different way from you. And you need to figure out how to work together in a situation a lot of the time. And sometimes you have to do that very fast. So these skills are new 21st century skills, but now it's because we're really recognizing these are skills that we need for life. And now we're trying to, after years of taking them out of the classroom, put them back in. And we're doing all of this again within our project management skills structure. So here's our slide about interference. For all of this, we do not want to have interference in the solution. This top part of the pyramid, right? We can build the base, but we can't be in the top part of the pyramid. So the solution, every drop of paint, every stitch on that costume, every line that's said, every projective voice that they use that is on that stage cannot come from anybody except for the team. But skills that they learn, you can teach them. Understanding the challenge, you need to make sure they understand the challenge. There's no interference in teaching them a skill, but you can't teach them how to do it on their solution. So they need to learn to project. So you're not going to take their lines from their play and let's practice projecting. Now say that louder, or you need to be louder. That would be interference. But they can do an acting class and learn about different projection techniques. You can do it in other ways that would not be interference. We want to focus on teamwork. When you're thinking about teamwork, what does that really mean? Teamwork begins by building trust. And the only way to do that is to overcome our need for invulnerability. One of the best ways for kids to realize that they are working together in a team and that they have potential is to realize that it's okay to fail. Because a lot of the time, a conflict is going to come up because a kid is afraid of being judged as a failure or being seen as somebody who's not able. And we want to get them into this headspace of building trust, that it's okay for me to not know something and to ask for help and to even openly admit that. So like, I have no idea how to do this and I need someone to teach me. That takes a lot of trust. And that doesn't happen immediately. Kids are not going to immediately, even if they're with their best friend, have this level of trust that failure is okay. But it is an essential part of learning. It is an essential part of moving forward as a team. So you want them to establish these collaborative skills, and you want to make sure that they know that there is these expectations of team behavior. That's part about that part about thinking about what are our rules going to be for meeting as a team, so we can make sure that part of our team behavior is that we respect each other's differences, that it's okay to say something wrong and we're going to support you in that. It takes time to build that. It's not something that happens immediately. When we think about collaboration, I'm going to actually skip this activity, but I do want to have a time that we'll do this activity. We might do this next week, but also because I want you to have time to think about it, about what teamwork really looks like. But we'll come back to it. When we think about collaboration, we have to think about the team roles that everybody falls into at some point in their life. But some kids naturally fall into one role or another. And that's okay. There's some kids that they're a natural team leader. And there's some kids that are a natural materials manager. There's some kids that are naturally going to be the ones that make sure we're following the rules. But it's important for them to have experiences in all the different types of roles. So these are just some examples of roles that they could fall into. The task manager, that's the person who's in charge of organizing the ideas, making sure that we understand what the task is, keeping people on track for completing a task like building a tower with straws or something like that. The performance manager, same thing, but leading towards a performance. What are the parameters of performance? We have to have a character. We have to have a prop. We have to have this, that, and the other thing, keeping them on track. Okay. The leader isn't necessarily somebody who's saying, this is the idea and we all have to do it. So, and that's something that it's hard for kids to get their head around. When they're working in a team, they need to take time to realize that not all the ideas are going to be used. Maybe my idea is not going to be used. Maybe our ideas are going to be collaboratively put together. So they get the idea that a leader is somebody who's telling everybody what to do. That's not really what a leader does. The leader keeps people on track. So it's important to take time to examine what these things mean and have them spend time doing these different roles. Materials manager is somebody who's going to make sure that Materials are being used completely and used properly. A lot of the time when you get them into a headspace of instant challenge, they just start messing with material and breaking things and throwing things around, and it becomes kind of wasteful because they're experimenting with the material. But the materials make sure that, hey guys, we only have one styrofoam tray. If we immediately break it into little pieces, what is that really going to do for us? We need to make sure that we're conserving the materials. Score manager, making sure that they're checking that they're going to earn the most points, or focusing on things that are going to earn more points because they receive this information when they're dealing with an IC. The timekeeper, the person who's going to make sure that they're checking for the time, to make sure that they are listening for the time to be called out. You get used to doing this as a team manager. You're going to call out the time when they're working with IC, but then slowly you take that away so that they start to ask for the time. And they start to get in their head what 1 minute really means, because it feels like it's going to be really long, but it goes by really fast when you're trying to accomplish something. The idea of having different roles is not something that came out of, like when we think about different areas that kids are good at, we're thinking about like the visual, auditory, kinetic philosophy of learning. We want them to try different roles, not because we want them to find out what is the best role for them, but because we want them to have experience in different spaces. When we want to teach in the classroom and we want to teach in different ways, we're going to teach by presenting information. We're going to teach by having them try to do the information. We're going to teach by modeling and seeing what they do with it. We're going to teach by having them work together. This idea is not so that every kid gets to learn in the way that they're most comfortable, but because we want them to have exposure to all the types of ways they could acquire information. And the same thing works with these roles. So one of the team managers from my school, what she does is she has like a little hat, and then she'll have all the team roles and she'll have them pull out a role. Today, you're going to be the timekeeper. So maybe they've never been the timekeeper. Maybe they're not comfortable being the timekeeper, but they need to have that experience trying these different roles and collaborating in different ways. Because a lot of the time, someone who's the leader who says, oh, I'm the leader, they're not necessarily the leader because they haven't had an experience in other roles. They don't know how it feels to be in other roles. When they have different perspectives and they work in different roles, they start to open their eyes a little bit more about what it is that they're expected to do. They realize they sympathize in these other spaces, but they also realize that sometimes those kids that are really good leaders are kids that never took that role on before. I think it's a line from Harry Potter, like the ones who are most suited to leadership are usually the ones who never sought out to be a leader. And I think that follows a lot for teens. The same thing works for teens. So when they're not ever having this experience, once they start to move into it, they realize they could be pretty good at it. I had a team that there was one boy who was the loud talker. And to an outside perspective, it looked like he was the leader because he was always the one it looked like he was directing everything. But when I sat down and watched them do an IC one day, I realized that we had this boy who's the loud talker, but we had a girl who's the leader, because what she was doing is she's telling everybody else, okay, we're just going to listen to him, let him talk, but we're going to make sure we're focused on these things. And this is what it says. So just agree with what he says, and then we're going to add the other things to it. So he felt like he was the leader, but really who was the leader? She was really the ideal leader. She was the one who was organizing everybody else to make sure that he was included, not calling him out as it was a fault, but just saying, look, this person is like this and we need to work with him that way. So it's important to spend time doing these different roles. And I would encourage you, when you're working with them, to be doing this collaboration practice of having them draw their role out of a hat or assigning roles so they can have experiences in different roles, because they might find a role they really like, they never tried before. But also, what happens if the materials manager suddenly quits the team? Now we don't have anybody who's controlling the materials, and nobody's had experience doing that before. So it's important for them to have exposure in these different spaces. It doesn't want to go.
Ali,
Yeah.
before you move on, Maria Eduarda asked in the chat if you could explain more the difference between the task and the performance manager.
Okay. Yeah. Part of this is because this one is shorter, but usually I would do this one after I did the team challenge and the instant challenge. So that's not totally clear because that applies to the different types of instant challenge, which we'll talk about next weekend, but just a quick rundown. The task, there's two types of instant challenge that you end up with. And this applies to the team challenges as well, because you will have things you have to build and you will have things you have to perform in the team challenge. But with instant challenge, you have two types of instant challenges. So you have a task-based instant challenge where you have to build something. There's a specific thing you have to complete that usually is a materials-based piece. If you have a performance-based instant challenge, then you might have specific things you have to do in a performance. So that's why I didn't want to do that instant challenge on the previous slide, because you guys haven't had enough exposure about what these things are. So I'm going to throw that in the beginning, maybe in the end of the next one, so that we can just have that experience of thinking about it. But it's because of these things, because there is always, in the team challenge and the instant challenge, there's always things that have to be built or performed or both. So sometimes one team has a person who's really good at being a task manager, and someone has a performance manager that is a little, and these end up being different people because of interests, because of skill sets, because of experiences. So that's why they're two separate roles. The same idea applies, but it's two separate roles. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, please, if you have a question, either open the microphone or put it in the chat. And if I miss it, please do let me know.
Sure. Thanks, Fred.
So communication skills, okay? We are working towards communication skills with these kids. This is not something that happens immediately. And this is a really, really, really lovely conversation that I do want us to take the time to have. I'm going to show you the pieces, but then next weekend, I'm going to ask you to revise and think about what these pieces are. But when you're forming a team, okay, teamwork and collaboration doesn't happen immediately because we don't always have communication. Communication is a process, and it's more than just I say my idea and you hear my idea. There's these different stages and they all rhyme, so it sounds really fun. So we have the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And in some dialect in the United States, all of those words actually do rhyme, but not in Michigan. So in my dialect, adjourning does not rhyme, but it does somewhere, but I don't know which dialect it is. But these are all stages that all teams will have to go through, even if they're a team that they were a team last year and it's the same makeup of kids, because it's a new context. We've had new experiences. We've had more growth. They still need to go through this moment with their challenge, with their team challenge, with their instant challenge of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. They will still go through this every year. And some teams won't complete all of these pieces of the communication process by the time they get to the end of 1 year of being a team. I had a team that they were in forming and storming. They were storming the entire year, and that just was the dynamic of that team. They continued to storm and storm for years until the team split into 3 different teams, and then they stopped storming because they could move on in that communication process. It is a process. When they're forming, especially if they don't know each other real well, people are very polite. They might not share all of their ideas. They might be worried about getting judged. They might not be honest about how they're feeling about an idea or about the way something is going. So it's important that you realize where they are in their process. And again, you're going to always be bringing it back to the creative process, but be aware where they are in this communication process, because this is also happening. Storming, what does that sound like? Because I know it's really hard to read what's on this slide because of how small the screenshot is.
It sounds like a, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Oh, I was asking, I was just repeating my question. My wait time was not there. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. I can't read it because indeed in my eyes are bad. But it sounds like a phase of conflict, like after they start opening and the storm starts brewing.
Yeah. It's like, it's the fighting stage. So like I had a team that they were constantly storming. Every single team meeting had Victoria, and Victoria's like always, she was very dramatic. Like literally she'd be like, she, no sé qué, no sé, no. It was very, everything that she said was like this. And then inevitably at some point, one of the members, either Victoria or maybe, I don't know who else it was, but usually Victoria would get up and storm out of the room and slam the door because she was so upset about something. The storming moment, it's a conflict moment. It's difficult to get through that moment. And that's the moment where a lot of kids give up. They give up on the process. And this is where your big work comes in this team formation moment. This is where you pull out all those skill sets and you start working with conflict resolution. Once we get through that, we have our norming stage. That's where we're starting to really initiate, collaborate, think about things. Performing, we're doing our thing. And adjourning, we're evaluating. We'll come back to this next weekend, because I do want to take time to have you guys think about what these things look and feel like. But over, let's say this is like your homework between now and then, try to look some of these up. There's, I think there's another slide on here that talks about this. Nope, maybe it's on another one. There is another slide where we look at these different levels that you will follow through on. It's really important to take the time to realize and have the kids realize that this is also a process. Just because your best friend is on your team does not mean you're going to be in a performing state of communication with your best friend on your team. Just because you are working with this person for a long time doesn't mean you're going to be able to be in that same stage. They need time to go through these stages, and they will go through them every year. What you see with the beginning when they're forming, they're all very polite. Maybe they don't all share their ideas. When they're storming, they start to fight with each other about whose idea is the best. When we get to that norming stage, they start to realize how to collaborate. And we need to bring them through all of those stages. All right. We're going to look at this very fast just to give you an idea about materials. But when we think about materials, if you have to look at this picture, this is a shot of a team performing their solution, I think probably in global finals, I'm guessing, just because there's nothing in the background, but who knows. What materials do you see here?
Maybe plastic, papelão, crepom, maybe. Dragon structure, I have no idea. Maybe it's papelão painted and some papel cellophane.
Is there aluminum? I don't know. Not sure.
What part do you think is aluminum?
The skirt.
Feathers.
Yeah, I don't.
This is more.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Yuri.
I think they might have used actual branches on the top of the dragon's head, maybe.
Part of our thinking in terms of creative problem solving is thinking about the use of materials. So here's one piece of homework to think about these different stages and look this up so that you have an idea about what these stages are. And then we'll actually have a collaborative slide we'll do next weekend to talk about this. I also want you to think about how materials are used, what materials this could be. because I'm not going to tell you what materials are here in the interest of trying to brainstorm, but I will tell you next weekend, because it really does matter when we're thinking about creative problem solving. We want the kids to think outside of the box. And one of the best ways to do that is by limiting the materials that they can use. I don't want to go any farther because then we'll get into a conversation that we won't be able to finish. So I think I'm going to leave it with our communication. So this is your homework between this weekend and next weekend. We need to spend time looking up these pieces. I'll put them even in the chat so we can look up here. Access to the slide. Oh, you mean with the materials or with these, with the things that we want to do as like homework?
Mean, for us to do our homework, this slide, this actual slide.
Forming, norming, forming, storming, norming, performing.
But where can we find this? In the Destination Imagination website?
No, these are communication stages. So this is something, this doesn't belong to DI. I mean, none of the things that are used in DI, that we use in DI, none of it belongs to DI. DI doesn't own the creative process. DI doesn't own project management. These are skills and structures that we use, and we use them in very specific ways. So with this communication process, this is a process that it's out there. This is a known process. So you can actually look at and see what these things look like in terms of communication skills. So I'm going to leave it at that for your homework between this weekend and next weekend. And I'm going to ask you to think about, where's the slide, how it looks for forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, versus and how it feels for these different things. And we'll come back to this and we will fill these things in. And I think that's where we'll start in our first moment next weekend, because I know some people need to go and I don't want to keep you guys too long. And we will come back to our skills building and our instant challenge and all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks for sticking it out for an extra period of time. It is what it is.